Across international summits and diplomatic backchannels, a strict consensus has formed among state leaders. The era of a Western-dominated world order has concluded. The evidence of this fracture is concentrated in the return of industrial, territorial warfare in Europe. Massive state collapse and vast humanitarian displacement in nations like Sudan demonstrate how this instability is radiating through the global South. High-density urban warfare and regional escalation across the Middle East complete a geographic triangle of cascading violence. At the Ricina Dialogue, Finnish President Alexander Stubb characterized these overlapping conflicts as specific evidence of a decaying global architecture. He argued that the current violence is a systemic byproduct of institutions that can no longer regulate power. Traditional political science attempts to explain this chaos by mapping the rising GDPs of the Global South and the return of raw power politics. These regional collisions signal a structural collapse. The global system is experiencing a mechanical failure that diplomatic dialogue alone cannot resolve. To understand this rupture, we must analyze global politics as a biophysical system rather than a set of ideological disputes. Using the Brain Kinematics Model, world order is a dynamic strain-flow network. States are individual nodes, and geopolitical pressures are accumulating particles of strain. These nodes connect through institutional channels, organizing around massive gravity wells, or global power centers. Stability is a temporary balance state. A global system survives only if its institutional channels can continuously absorb and redistribute geopolitical strain before the pressure physically fractures the network. Applying this lens to the post-World War II order reveals the exact mechanics of its long-term stability. The previous era functioned as a centralized attractor system, featuring a single dominant Western hub equipped to absorb strain from the globe. Instead of allowing pressure to build up inside individual nodes, this central hub routed it through a vast network of structured pathways. Formal discharge channels, the United Nations, the IMF, and the WTO, provided the physical and diplomatic space to process geopolitical friction safely. Global strain remained constant throughout this era. However, institutions successfully delayed and redistributed conflicts before they reached a destructive threshold. The rules-based order held together because its institutions possessed the mechanical capacity to process global pressure before local nodes reached critical mass. That mechanical capacity has vanished. The present global architecture has fractured into a desynchronized multi-node system. The central Western hub lost its exclusive dominance. Multiple competing attractors, representing China, India, and regional blocs, now pull the network in conflicting directions. Because these degraded pathways no longer match the physical distribution of global power, strain particles pool heavily inside individual nodes. This causes local overload. A regional state exceeds its internal pressure capacity and violently ruptures. Trapped pressure bypasses blocked diplomatic channels and travels through network coupling. The conflict moves along economic supply chains, energy markets, and defense alliances. This coupling triggers a dream jump, where a regional rupture instantly destabilizes distant, seemingly disconnected regions. Modern global war is the inevitable result of residual strain accumulating inside a system that has lost its coordinating mechanisms. Mark Carney's address to global elites at Davos highlights how this structural failure alters the behavior of individual nations. Carney warned middle powers against a passive, go-along-to-get-along strategy. He argued that accommodation offers no protection during an order rupture. Passive compliance creates a high residual strain adaptation state. A state suppresses internal pressures to outwardly match a dominant power signal. The internal structure pays the cost. The node maintains a facade of cooperation, while unresolved contradictions multiply beneath the surface. This mirrors Václav Havel's warning about the societal cost of living within a lie. States performing empty rituals eventually lose their internal stability. Outward compliance creates a state of false stabilization. The surface remains calm, while the internal structure of the node reaches a breaking point. Environments saturated with high residual strain create the biophysical conditions required for authoritarian systems to expand. BKM defines an authoritarian order as a highly centralized strain control system. It forces all network pressure into a single, rigid, top-down force vector. These regimes survive by permanently blocking institutional discharge channels. They simplify complex global networks into rigid, binary conflicts to manage internal pressure. Authoritarian expansion is a predictable mechanical reaction to network overload. When discharge pathways are blocked, coercion becomes the primary method for managing trapped strain. Can diplomatic voices and narrative interventions actually suppress these coercive network trends? A major diplomatic speech or policy declaration acts as a phase reset signal. It is a burst of clarifying information sent across the network. This signal is vital. It breaks the cycle of passive compliance and forces elite networks to synchronize their narratives around the actual threat. However, speeches cannot alter the load-bearing layers of global architecture, such as military leverage or economic dependence. Narrative intervention is inherently insufficient unless it is immediately followed by structural, physical load balancing across the network. The current systemic threat can be summarized in a unified formula. Conflict equals local overload plus blocked discharge plus network coupling plus rival attractor pull. In the first possible future, authoritarian expansion, coordination remains weak and coercion increases until the map becomes a chronic rupture field of permanent proxy wars. A second future involves partial containment. Middle powers coordinate enough to establish competing but balanced attractors, constraining authoritarian impulses without resolving the underlying pressure. The ultimate solution is a rebalanced multipolar order. Multiple power centers remain active, connected by robust phase-locked channels that route geopolitical strain safely across the entire network. This future requires rebuilding global institutions so that formal representation matches actual physical power. This requires integrating the Global South into the core load-bearing architecture. As Stubb and Carney have identified, a system becomes lethal when participants no longer believe in it but continue to act as if they do. Ultimately, the world cannot return to a single Western hub. Survival requires a synchronized multi-center system, where nodes actively redistribute geopolitical load instead of passively storing it until they break.